They thought I would disappear. That one push would end all hope, all beginnings. But they forgot one thing. When you corner a woman, she doesn't fall. She transforms. And this time, she's not coming back to beg for mercy. She's coming back to rewrite the story. Welcome to Scarlet Vows, where broken promises become the sharpened blades of justice. This is my story. The woman they tried to erase, only to witness her rise with the one thing they never had: love, peace, and pride. Chapter 1, the early days that felt like a fairy tale. I once believed I had finally found my safe haven. After years of struggling through broken relationships, Alex entered my life like a gentle breeze. He was calm kind, the first person who listened without judgment, the first who remembered how I liked my coffee, the flowers I adored, and even the song that could make me laugh on the worst rainy days. We married simply at the courthouse. No lavish gown, no extravagant reception, just him, me, and the promise that we would always stand by each other. The day I stepped into the Turner estate, the place where Alex was born and raised, I truly thought I was walking into a fairy tale. A grand Victorian house, towering white columns, a garden trimmed as perfectly as a postcard. Alex told me his family was traditional but warm. Naively, I believed him. My mother-in-law, Stephanie, was the kind of woman who could silence an entire room with a single glance. Her hair was always flawlessly styled, her posture as straight as a soldier's. In the wedding photos, she smiled graciously, posing with me as though she had accepted me as part of the family. But when I turned away, I caught her looking at me as though she were scrutinizing an outdated object. That gaze wasn't from a mother-in-law welcoming her daughter-in-law. It was from someone measuring whether I was worthy enough to enter the Turner bloodline. And then there was Georgia, Alex's sister, who didn't even bother to hide her disdain. A few years older than me, still single, sharp-tongued, and bitter. Georgia never attacked me outright, but every word, every glance was laced with contempt. When I rearranged the living room to make more space, she loudly remarked that some people don't understand the value of family tradition. When I cooked using my grandmother's recipe, she pushed the food around on her plate before saying she wasn't accustomed to experimental cuisine. I tried my hardest to adapt. Every day I clean cooked and smiled. I thought that with enough time they would accept me. Even though the air in that house grew heavier with each passing day, I clung to Alex, the man who had once held my hand and promised that with him I would always be safe. Back then, I had no idea that what I was stepping into wasn't a fairy tale at all. It was a trap, a velvet-lined, flower-draped trap behind which lay blades that had been sharpened long before, waiting only for me to let my guard down. Chapter 2, The Unwelcome Child. I became pregnant nearly a year into my marriage with Alex. It wasn't unexpected. We had talked about having children many times. Alex once told me he loved kids, had even touched my belly, and whispered about a future filled with children's laughter echoing through this house. I believed him. I chose a Sunday evening to share the good news. The whole family was gathered around the long dining table golden light, spilling over the Turner ancestors' portraits that hung solemnly on the wall. I placed the ultrasound photo beside Alex's plate. My heart pounded so hard I thought everyone must hear it. I waited for a smile, a congratulation, an embrace. But what I received instead was silence, heavy, suffocating, like a rope tightening around my throat. Alex looked at the photo, then set down his fork. He said nothing. Stephanie merely dabbed her lips with a napkin, her eyes unblinking. "What a surprise," she said. That was all? "No congratulations. No, motherhood is wonderful." Georgia gave a derisive laugh, the kind that made my skin crawl. "Well, that was quick," she sneered, as though I had sprung some trap on them. Alex spoke softly. "We should talk privately after dinner." He never once looked at me. That night I lay with my back turned to him in the same room where we had once shared kisses and dreams. I told myself they just needed time, that any big news could be shocking at first, that they were simply a traditional family, slow to open their hearts. But I was wrong. In the weeks that followed, as the baby inside me grew, the chill in the Turner household thickened by the day. Stephanie began leaving books about pregnancy complications on the kitchen counter, on bookshelves even in my bedroom. Heavy volumes filled with grim images of miscarriages, ectopic pregnancies, deformities. Every time I picked one up, she would give me a faint smile. Oh, just some old books, but you know it never hurts to be prepared. Georgia grew more brazen. She invited friends over and right in the living room, told stories about wonderful expectant mothers. She knew all of them, educated, graceful, disciplined. When morning sickness left me able to stomach nothing but dry crackers, she complained that the smell of my food kept the entire house awake. And Alex, he started coming home late. When I brought up preparing a nursery, he would murmur vaguely and then retreat into phone calls. When I asked him to help choose a name for the baby, he said, "Maybe we should wait." Then he uttered words I would never forget. "I'm not sure this is the right time. We're not financially ready. Maybe we should consider other options." "Other options," I repeated, my voice trembling. He didn't answer, just avoided my eyes as though I were a stranger. The gentle husband I once knew was fading into a shadow, distant, evasive. Sometimes I would walk into the room and find him whispering into his phone. The moment I stepped closer, he would hang up. I knew what they were talking about. I felt Stephanie's icy stare, that glance that sliced through me as though I were a blemish in their carefully written family lineage. Georgia's eyes followed me too, as if she were counting the days until I would be gone from this house. I came to realize, to them, I wasn't a wife. I was a mistake. A problem that needed fixing. And the child in my womb, the greatest joy of my life, was in their eyes nothing more than a burden no one wanted to acknowledge. Chapter 3. The Fateful Push. I never thought I would fall. But then I did, literally, and in a way that only later would I fully grasp the coldness behind that fall. It was just an ordinary Tuesday evening. Stephanie was hosting dinner again in the grand dining room, as always, where the chandelier lights reflected off the fine china, and everyone pretended not to despise one another. I had just finished cleaning up my 5-month belly, making my back ache and my feet swell, but I didn't complain. I had learned that in the Turner household, complaining was a sign of weakness. I carried a tray of dishes upstairs at Stephanie's request. The help shouldn't be cleaning up the family's dinnerware, she had once said. The Turners had a sweeping staircase, grand and curved, stunning in wedding photos, but a nightmare for a pregnant woman. Step by step, I climbed breath shallow, struggling to keep balance with the heavy tray. Then it happened, a sudden forceful shove from behind. No shout, no warning, just one push, cold and deliberate, between my shoulder blades. Time froze for a heartbeat. I felt my body lurch forward. The tray flew from my hands, china shattering against the wall, and steps in a cascade of tragic fireworks. Instinctively, I cradled my belly as my body tumbled downward. I can't recall how many steps I struck. I only remember the searing pain along my back, my hip, my ribs, and then I lay crumpled at the foot of the staircase, gasping arms wrapped around my stomach. The physical pain was nothing compared to the terror screaming inside me. What about the baby? Is the baby still alive? I heard footsteps above. Not rushed, not panicked, just murmurs, cold hushed, as if they were quietly conferring, not witnessing a pregnant woman's fall. No one called for help immediately. No one screamed in shock. No one ran down to check if I was breathing. And in that moment, I knew with certainty they hadn't wanted me to stumble. They had wanted me gone, me and the child. At the hospital, the doctor didn't ask whether I had been pushed or had fallen. She simply smoothed gel across my bruised skin, guiding the ultrasound probe over my belly. I bit my lip. I had never longed for a sound so desperately. And then it came. A heartbeat. My baby's heartbeat, strong and steady, throbbed through the sterile white room like a war drum. Tears spilled down my face. The baby's fine." "You're both lucky," the doctor said with a gentle smile. I nodded, pretending to believe it was just an accident. I still played the role of the clumsy wife, the woman who didn't know how to keep her balance. But inside, I knew the truth. It had been a message, a warning, an unspoken declaration of war. Alex drove me home as if nothing had happened. He carefully opened the door, helped me out of the car, then said, "You should be more careful. Pregnant women are prone to losing balance." I looked straight into his eyes, and for the first time I saw something unfamiliar. Not love, not fear, but a ruthless indifference. That night I lay in the dark, listening to my husband's steady breathing, and I made a decision. Not to run, not to beg, but a decision silent, cold, and sharp as the paring knife in the kitchen. They wanted me broken, but they forgot one thing. I was once a chemist, and I know how to destroy something without leaving a trace. Chapter 4. A Plan in Silence. After that fall, I knew I could no longer trust anyone in that house. Not Alex, not Stephanie, and certainly not Georgia. But I also knew if I fought back now, I would lose. I was pregnant, had no money, no family nearby, no lawyer, and most importantly, I was living in their house under their rules. So I chose silence. I became a ghost who obeyed. I woke early, did the chores answered when spoken to, gave faint smiles when mocked, bowed my head at the right moments. I shrank into myself exactly as they expected, and they began to relax. Stephanie laughed more often. Georgia whistled when passing by me and Alex. He remained distant, but he stopped watching me so closely. They thought I had broken. But the truth was, I was rebuilding myself from the inside out. I spent my days observing, memorizing every detail of their routines. Stephanie always left the house on Thursdays at 2 p.m. for her ladies' card club. Georgia often forgot her anxiety medication in the upstairs bathroom unlocked, and Alex, blinded by my submissive act, left all of the cooking to me. He never checked what I prepared, never questioned the vitamins I handed him every morning. It was then that I drew upon what they had underestimated most about me, my past. Specifically, the bachelor's degree in chemistry I had earned before switching to fashion. I recalled every formula, every chemical reaction, every method of mixing and concealing. Knowledge that Alex once brushed off when I spoke about my university years now became the sharpest weapon in my arsenal. I began preparing, bit by bit, no haste, no mistakes. I bought ingredients from different stores, only a little at a time: herbal teas from the pharmacy, vitamins from the supermarket, an unusual spice from the organic food shop, each harmless in isolation. But combined in the right way, they could slowly strip a man of his fertility without anyone suspecting. I didn't want to kill anyone. I only wanted to reclaim my power, and more importantly, I wanted them to feel what it was like to lose something they had always taken for granted. At the same time, I quietly gathered evidence: strange receipts in Alex's jacket, midnight calls he cut short when I entered the room, whispered conversations between Georgia and her mother behind my back. I photographed, recorded, archived everything onto a small drive hidden in the lining of my winter coat. And then I planned my escape. I couldn't give birth in that house. I couldn't let my child grow up under the shadow of a family that saw it as a curse. But if I disappeared, I had to vanish the right way, leaving no legal loopholes, no trail for them to follow, and above all, no chance for them to erase my child's existence as they so dearly wished. I began withdrawing cash, small amounts. I created a secondary identity. I contacted a midwife at a community clinic where no one asked too many questions. Everything unfolded in darkness, quiet, invisible. And then came my last night in the Turner house. I cooked a perfect dinner, beef Wellington, Alex's favorite, the very dish his mother once taught me to make with her counterfeit smile. He devoured it, showering me with praise. And I only smiled sweetly, watching him take the final bite. Beneath that porcelain plate, I had taped a tiny slip of paper with just 2 words: infertile now, no threats, no explanations. Just a truth colder than the ice cream dessert I served immediately after. The next morning, while they still slept, I was gone. No one knew where I went. No one knew what I carried. And they certainly didn't know that what I carried was everything they had tried to erase from this world, a child, a truth, and a revenge plan that had only just begun. Chapter 5. A place where no one knows my name. I left the Turner house before dawn. The sky was still pitch black when I stepped onto the bus stop. 2 streets away, carrying a small suitcase, a handbag, and the growing life inside my belly. No tears. No looking back. I had already cried enough. I had only one mission left: to protect this child at any cost. I went to a neighborhood the Turners would never set foot in. A place too modest, too gritty, too different from the glamorous, arrogant world they lived in. There, I rented a tiny room above a Vietnamese PHO shop. No air conditioning, no elevator, but the landlords were kind and rent was paid weekly. They didn't ask too many questions, and that was all I needed. The room was barely 10 square meters. The walls were so thin I could hear the chopping of knives downstairs and the radio music bleeding in from next door. But it was mine. It was the first place in months where I could take a full breath without fear of being judged or watched. I spent the first week sleeping. Truly sleeping. Not the restless kind of sleep, terrified of being pushed down the stairs. Not the shallow sleep meant only to survive, but the sleep of someone who knew in the morning no one would knock on the door to tell her she didn't fit the family tradition. Then the day of birth came. No luxury maternity ward, no husband by my side, no flowers or cameras to capture a sacred moment. Just me and a midwife named Rosa, a woman about my mother's age, who held my hand tight and whispered, "Push through, darling." Labor pain was nothing compared to the suffering I had endured in that mansion. I was already used to pain, but this time I hurt for something worthy. And when the first cry rang out in the cold, rainy night, I knew I had won. I named my son Liam Alexander Turner, a name carrying the strength of 2 bloodlines a mother once scorned and shoved down a staircase, and a father who had lost the right to be one without ever knowing why. His name was written on the birth certificate, careful, clear. I kept everything: the hospital bracelet, ultrasound copies, delivery bills, every piece of evidence proving my son's existence. Not just existence, but survival, in spite of rejection, in spite of schemes to erase him. And now he was my every reason to go on. I started working any job a single mother without practical qualifications could find: cleaning offices at dawn, walking dogs, in the afternoon folding laundry at the laundromat. Then one day, the owner of the local tailoring shop, Mrs. Chin, saw me hand-stitching Liam's pants. The stitches were so straight, they looked machine-sewn. She said only one sentence: "You know how to sew. Come here, I've got work for you." From that day, I began sewing for hire. My first stitches weren't about art. They were an escape. Every needle, every seam was my way of telling the world I'm still here. I'm not finished yet. Each night I worked late under the old yellow lamp, Liam sleeping beside me, his head resting on a pillow I had made from leftover fabric. And in his sleep I saw a future: no shouting voices, no dangerous staircases, no disdainful stares. Only love. I remained silent to the outside world. The Turners didn't know where I was. Didn't know that Liam was growing stronger every day. Didn't know that I was no longer the woman they had once cornered into despair. I was Liam's mother. I was Sarah Turner. And I still had one last thing left to do. Chapter 6. The door I never expected life with Liam slowly settled into stability. No one found us. No word from the Turner family, no calls, no letters, no apologies. Part of me felt relief. The other part was furious. They thought I was dead. Or perhaps they wanted to believe it. And like the powerful people, they were used to scrubbing away every stain. They continued their luxurious lives without ever looking back. But then the call came. It was a Monday morning. I was folding children's clothes at the sewing shop when my phone rang. An unknown number. A deep professional male voice. "Hello, I'm an attorney from the Turner Estate Inheritance Office. Are you Sarah Turner?" For a few seconds I was frozen. "Turner Estate," he continued. "We are in the process of executing the final will of Mr. Kyle Turner. Before his passing, he left his estate to an individual named Liam Alexander Turner, born February 12th, your son. Could you please confirm?" I shot up from my chair. My legs trembled. My heart pounded in my chest. Mr. Kyle Turner. He remembered Liam. It took me nearly 10 minutes to steady myself and confirm my identity. The lawyer didn't say much more, just sent me an email with a clear subject line: Turner Estate, beneficiary identification. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a copy of the will stamped and verified by the court. I, Kyle Edward Turner, being of sound mind, do hereby leave my entire net estate, valued at $12 million to my only legitimate grandchild. By blood, Liam Alexander Turner. No mention of Stephanie. No mention of Alex. No mention of Georgia. Only one name, Liam. And I realized Kyle had never despised me. He had only been silent. He was the one person in that family who once handed me a cup of hot tea on a night when I was in pain and no one else cared. The one who had told me, not everyone in this house sees silence as complicity. Now I understood. He knew, and he had left behind the one thing the Turners could not ignore: the fortune. The very next day, I received another email, this time from Stephanie Turner's office itself. They demanded that Liam and I undergo DNA testing to verify the identity of the rightful heir. How absurd. The very child they once denied, treated as non-existent, now needed to be verified in order to save their inheritance. I didn't respond immediately. I let them wait. 3 days later, a man in a suit arrived at the sewing shop, introducing himself as a paralegal from Turner and Steinberg. Polite, but unable to hide his urgency. "Mrs. Turner wishes to settle privately. If you agree to renounce your son's inheritance rights, the family is prepared to transfer to you a substantial sum." I smiled, pulled from my wallet an old ultrasound photo clipped together with Liam's birth certificate and the hospital record of the day he was born. I placed them in front of him. "Take these back to her. Tell her, this is the proof I've kept for the past 5 years, and if necessary, I have the wedding video copies of text messages, hospital bills, even the recording of what Georgia said after my fall." His face went pale. I continued without raising my voice. They once tried to erase me and my son. But unfortunately for them, I'm not the kind of woman who disappears so easily. That night, I held Liam as he slept, just as I always did. My son slept soundly, his long lashes fluttering his lips, slightly parted as if dreaming of a world without worry. I looked at him, then turned to my laptop, where a special folder was already open, its name, Redemption. Inside was every piece of evidence, every recording, every photo, every receipt, everything I had silently gathered, not for violent revenge, but to restore the truth for my child. The Turner family might have lawyers, but I had time, and I had memory, the memories they thought I had buried. Chapter 7, The Curtain of Truth. I didn't attend the meeting they demanded. Instead, I sent my lawyer Clayton Hendris to appear on my behalf, carrying a thick envelope filled with every document proving Liam's existence and bloodline. Clayton told me later how it unfolded inside the icy cold boardroom of Turner Estate. When he laid the envelope on the ebony table, Stephanie froze. Georgia shot up as if ready to speak, but her mother gripped her hand to silence her. Only Alex stared at those papers like a man watching his dream being torn apart. "This is irrefutable legal proof," Clayton said. "Liam Turner is the sole heir of Mr. Kyle Turner. Any resistance from this family will be treated as attempted misappropriation of assets." They said nothing, not a word. 3 days later, I received a handwritten letter from Stephanie Turner. Her penmanship was flawless as ever, every stroke in elegant purple ink. But the words were different. Sarah, I don't expect your forgiveness, nor do I deserve it. But I beg you for one thing. Do not take away Alex's chance to be a father. Let my grandson know his origins, the place he came from, even if we have made terrible mistakes. I folded the letter. No tears, no trembling, only emptiness. Now she wanted to be a grandmother after everything. After they once wished Liam would never be born, I looked at Liam scribbling with crayons, sketching a wedding dress. My son did not need them, but I knew the time for confrontation would come. It arrived that Saturday afternoon when Clayton knocked on the shop door and said, "They've agreed. The entire estate property's shares cash has been officially transferred into Liam's name, but," I looked up, "but what Alex wants to see his son, just once. Not to fight, not to claim custody, just to see him." I was silent, not because I was afraid, but because I realized I was no longer angry, no longer in pain. I had won, and I had won completely. The meeting took place in the small park behind the shop. That day the sky was unusually clear. Liam wore a white shirt I had sewn myself, holding a paper airplane darting across the grass. Alex stood there, thinner eyes heavy with sadness, watching his child like a traveler arriving on an alien planet. He bent down and asked softly, "Liam, would you like to fly planes with your dad?" Liam looked back at me. I nodded. My son ran over, handing him one of the paper planes. I made 2. One for Mom, one for Dad. Mom said you used to like flying. Alex nearly broke down in tears. No accusations, no blame, no bargaining. Just a moment of peace where the man who had abandoned me could only stand in awe of what the woman he once dismissed had built. After that day, Alex left. He sent me an email of gratitude, promising never to interfere, never to contest custody. Stephanie and Georgia disappeared from all contact. I no longer cared. I had Liam. I had a small sewing shop, its lights glowing each night. I had a simple, free life no one could control. And above all, I had the truth they once denied. The truth I had protected with blood tears and the strength of a single mother. I didn't need to strike them down with a fatal blow. I avenged myself with the proud existence of 2 souls, mother and child, standing tall in the world that once tried to erase us. Chapter 8. The Curse. Lifted life gradually found its balance after that meeting. I no longer jolted awake in the middle of the night at strange noises. No longer glanced over my shoulder when walking Liam to daycare. No longer lived in the shadow of a family that once sought to destroy me. We had stepped into the light. The little shop grew busier. Mothers came in carrying their children, choosing tiny dresses or suits for baptisms and first birthdays. They often asked me, "Did you sew all of these yourself?" I would smile and reply with my whole heart. Because it was true. Every stitch, every seam was sewn out of survival. I wasn't just making clothes. I was stitching my life back together. One October afternoon, as sunlight spilled gently across the awning, Liam asked me, "Mom, your old house, was it like in a fairy tale?" I froze. The old house, Turner Mansion, the place that shoved me down the stairs, the place that once called the baby in my belly an unwanted accident. I sat down, pulling him into my arms. Yes, it looked like a castle, but it wasn't where princesses lived. It was where dragons lived. Liam's eyes widened. "Then who were you?" I smiled. I was the one who left the castle to build another kingdom where the prince would never be hurt. About a month later, Clayton called. "Sarah, do you want to attend the official asset transfer hearing? Liam doesn't have to be there. But if you want closure, this is the moment." At first I thought of refusing. I had no need to watch them bow their heads. But then I realized, one day Liam might ask, "How did you win justice for me?" Mom and I needed an answer. That day in court was not noisy. No shouting. No tears. Just signatures, documents, and a firm nod from the judge. The estate is hereby legally transferred to the heir, Liam Alexander Turner. I turned to look at Stephanie. She was no longer the proud, imperious woman I once knew. Her eyes were vacant, her hands clenched tightly together. For the first time, she seemed small. Georgia wasn't there, perhaps too cowardly, or simply unwilling to witness me win again. And Alex. He looked at me for a long time as I walked out into the hallway. Thank you for not making me the eternal villain in my son's eyes. I replied, I didn't need to. You did that all on your own. It wasn't bitter. Just the truth. Liam doesn't yet know about the fortune in his name. I haven't told him. He doesn't need to know how wealthy he is. What he needs to know is that his mother never gave up. One winter night, as we curled beneath the blankets, I whispered, Do you know why I named you Liam? He nuzzled into my chest. Because you liked it, I smiled, smoothing his hair. No, Liam means strong protector. I wanted you to be strong but kind. Resilient but never cruel. He nodded sleepily, his eyes fluttering shut in my arms. That night I understood something profound. The greatest victory is not in how deeply you strike back, but in living peacefully freely while those who once harmed you remain haunted by their own sins. And I, a single mother, a seamstress, a woman once deemed not good enough. I had risen above it all with love, with truth, and with a resilience no one could break. Chapter 9, The Last Dress and the Door That Closed. There's something strange about time. When you're drowning in pain, it drags slow and suffocating. But once peace finds you, it flows like the wind. 3 years had passed since the day I silently walked away from the Turner mansion. Liam was now in senior kindergarten. He loved drawing airplanes playing with clay and had an endless fascination with questions like, why doesn't the sky fall down? I often joked with Martha. My son was born to defy gravity and every dark intention they once cast over his head. My little shop, Liam Stitch, was no longer a stranger's name in the neighborhood. We had regulars, long-distance custom orders, and sometimes handwritten thank you letters from mothers, with photos of their children wearing the clothes I had sewn. One day I received a special order, a wedding dress, that needed a full silhouette alteration within a week. When the bride arrived, I was momentarily stunned. Victoria. She stood there bathed in the late afternoon sun, nothing like the woman I'd seen at the church that day. Gone was the cold elegance of the upper class. Before me stood a woman who looked truly happy. Sarah, she said before I could speak, I know who you are, and I came to thank you. I looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. No words needed. When a woman is strong enough to walk away from $1 million wedding because she discovered the truth, I had no reason to resent her. On the contrary, I felt proud. That night, as I stitched the final lace hem on Victoria's gown, Liam came beside me and asked, Mom, did you ever wear a wedding dress? I paused. Yes, but not the dress I dreamed of, and not with someone who deserved it. He blinked. Were you sad? I looked at my son, the child they once tried to erase, now standing strong, curious, and full of light. No, I smiled, because I chose the right person to walk this life with. One Sunday morning, I received a handwritten letter. No name, no seal, just a few lines. I sold the house. It's never felt this empty before. Maybe because for the first time it's missing the daughter-in-law it should have welcomed from the beginning. Wishing you and your son happiness. Kay. I read it over and over. Kay, could it have been Kyle? No, he had passed. Alex, possibly. Strangely, my heart didn't flinch. There was only a soft sense of lightness, as if the final door had just gently closed. No sound, no draft, just closed. That evening, I told Liam a bedtime story about a cold stone castle and a princess who didn't wait for a prince, but built her own kingdom. And then what happened, Mom? Liam asked, eyes glowing. I kissed his forehead. Then she lived happily ever after. Not because she married a king, but because she learned how to become the queen of her own life. Bam! And perhaps that was the true ending to the story I once feared to recall. Not when the Turners lost their fortune, not when Victoria walked away from the altar, but the moment I realized I no longer held anger toward anyone. Forgiveness sometimes isn't about setting others free. It's about freeing yourself. Chapter 10, The Reckoning and the Final Gift. I never imagined that one day I would return to the Turner estate. And yet, on a crisp autumn morning, Clayton called me. "Sarah, the house has been seized. Stephanie has passed away, and Alex has nowhere left to go." I stayed silent for a long time before answering. What am I supposed to feel about that Clayton relief satisfaction? He didn't reply, because we both knew those emotions no longer mattered. The downfall of the Turner family didn't bring me joy. They didn't fall because I struck them down. They fell because they built their lives on lies. Georgia got caught in a financial scandal, falsified records, fake investments, assets vanishing like sand slipping through fingers. Stephanie died of a stroke in the very house where she once imprisoned her daughter-in-law with isolation and scorn. And Alex was left alone with a crumbling legacy and a thick envelope I had once entrusted to the lawyer. Inside were the fertility diagnosis papers, along with dozens of photos from the hidden cameras I had quietly installed in the living room. Both his crimes and his silence were documented. I never needed to use them to put him behind bars. I only needed him to understand one thing: truth never stays buried forever. A year later, on Liam's 6th birthday, we threw an outdoor party at the shop. Martha was still Liam's beloved grandma. Victoria came too this time with her husband and a newborn baby girl in her arms. I watched Liam run across the grass with the other children, hair messy, hands sticky with frosting, laughing like he had never known darkness. "Do you know why I named you Liam?" I asked as I held him close while the sun began to set. He shook his head. Liam in Irish means resolute protector. He looked up at me, his eyes more like Kyle's than ever. "Am I a protector?" Mom, I nodded. "Not just for me, but for everything that's right. You're the reason I never gave up. You're the one thing they could never take from me. I had gotten my revenge, but not through blood or tears or violence. I avenged myself by living well, by creating a life they could never touch. They had pushed me down a staircase. They had tried to kill the child inside me, but I got up. I survived, and I built an empire from the very ruins they left behind. Now every night when I fold up my sewing machine and kiss Liam on the forehead, I no longer feel hatred, only peace, because those who do evil will always destroy themselves, and the brave, the ones once pushed to the very bottom, will always rise like blades of grass breaking through stone. And that is the ending we deserved. For me, for my son, and for everyone who was ever underestimated, dismissed, but never, ever gave up." Chapter 11, When the Past Knocks, I thought that after everything, I would never have to face them again. The Turner family, the name that once suffocated me, was now just a folded memory tucked away in the deepest drawer of my mind. But the past, it never truly disappears. It simply waits for the perfect moment of vulnerability to knock again. And it knocked on a quiet April afternoon while I was cutting fabric for a wedding gown commissioned by the daughter of a state senator. The doorbell rang firm, polite, but cold. Not the kind of ring from a familiar neighborhood customer. I stepped out of the fitting room and saw him. Alex. He stood on the threshold of my boutique, no longer the polished man from years ago. His shirt was wrinkled, his tie crooked, his eyes tired, like someone who hadn't slept in days. I didn't speak first. After a moment, he said, "I didn't come here to cause trouble. I just wanted to see my son." My chest tightened. Son. One word. But to me, it carried an entire lifetime of fighting, a lifetime of protection, a life they once tried to erase without remorse. I led him to the back room where Liam was playing with an old box of Legos. He looked up, curious, then went right back to building his tower, as if a child's instinct had already sensed this stranger didn't belong too close. Alex stood still, I saw his eyes go red, perhaps with regret, perhaps because for the first time he was truly seeing what he had lost. "He looks like my father," he murmured. I said nothing. I didn't need to. There aren't enough ways to say I'm sorry he looked up at me, but I won't disappear unless you want me to. I stood there, fingers gripping the hem of my dress, steadying my breath. "You disappeared when I needed you the most," I said slowly. "And now, he doesn't need pity. He needs peace. I didn't send him away, but I didn't welcome him either." Alex left in silence, and I realized I wasn't afraid of him anymore. I didn't ache at the mention of his name. I had risen above it. I had won. That night I sat beside Liam as he slept. I kissed his forehead and whispered, "No matter how many doors from the past come knocking, I will always be the one standing in front of them. You'll never have to endure what I went through, because I was no longer the girl who was pushed down the stairs. I was a mother, a survivor, a keeper of promises, and my promise was to protect my son no matter the cost." Chapter 12. Peace is the sweetest revenge. Time passed. I stopped counting. No longer marked the days like I used to when I lived in the Turner household, where every moment was a battlefield. Now each morning is a reward. Each afternoon a new opportunity. And every evening is a reminder that we survived. Liam is 5. His eyes still hold that cool gray of the Turner bloodline, but his gaze is warm and full of love, like the sun in late summer. He loves reading, and he asks big, unfiltered questions like, "Why do people hurt each other?" Or, "Mom, are you sad when you're alone?" I smile, stroke his hair, and answer, "I've never been alone, because I have you." My little shop, Liam's Legacy, has become a known name in the neighborhood. Customers come from all over to order wedding dresses, christening gowns, and children's suits, not just for the craftsmanship, but because they can feel the love in every stitch. Each garment I make is a story, a declaration: we're still here, still living, still loving, and no one can erase that. The Turner family. They still exist, but they are no longer part of my life. Stephanie sends letters every year on Liam's birthday, cold clinical letters written by lawyers devoid of love. Georgia once tried to show up at Liam's preschool. Once. Clayton handled everything. Every threat, every attempted claim, every subtle effort to claw the inheritance back, they all crumbled once I presented the documents, the photos, the proof. No insult could override the truth. They lost. Not by vengeance or retaliation. They lost because I survived. I rose, and I never bowed. I remember that afternoon so clearly when Liam stood on the stage at his preschool graduation holding the microphone, with both hands, his eyes wide and sparkling like he knew the universe was listening. He said, "I love my mom because she's the strongest person in the world." I cried, not because it was praise, but because it was true, and it had taken me a lifetime to believe it. Alex was no longer a terrifying chapter. He was a lesson. The last time he showed up, I allowed Liam to play with his father at the park for 1 hour. Not because I had forgiven him, but because Liam deserved to know the part of his past that ran through his veins. When he returned, Liam only said, "Dad's really sad, Mom." But I don't like being sad. I like laughing with you more. I held my son close, and I knew I had made the right choice. I hadn't avenged myself with knives or fire. I had done it through the quiet strength of a mother's love. I didn't live to make them suffer. I lived so they could never hurt me again. And that was the greatest statement I could ever make as someone who had been pushed down but never broken. I won, not with blood, but with love. I didn't need them to kneel to weep or to repent. I only needed to stand in my tiny home, where my son sleeps peacefully each night, where my sewing machine hums like a determined heartbeat, and know I turn pain into power, tears into legacy, and myself into someone they could never defeat. A peaceful woman is the one thing the world once tried to extinguish, but couldn't. Because when she rises, she doesn't need to scream. She only needs to smile. I didn't seek revenge through fire. I didn't need to destroy them with my own hands. I simply walked away and built a life they could never touch. A child wrapped in love. A sunlit little shop. A life lived without bowing to anyone. And sometimes that is the kind of revenge that hurts them the most. Have you ever been betrayed? Have you ever stayed silent only to rise again, just like I did? Share your story in the comments. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and tap the notification bell so you never miss the vows written in blood and tears. I'm Scarlet Vows, and this is where scars tell the real story.